this is going to sound like blasphemy, but this might be the best Chiefs team in the entire Patrick Mahomes era. Like, just imagine the 2018 offense that basically scored at will, and then pair it with a defense that wasn't run by Bob Sutton. And that's basically what this team is. They're going to be able to put up points on probably anybody they want to, and their defense can back it up. I know what their record said early on in the season. I don't care. If you just watched the Chiefs in the first few weeks, you knew that this team was better than last year's team that went to the Super Bowl. So somehow here we are, it's 2025, and we have found ourselves in the ridiculous position where the Kansas City Chiefs are underrated. First things first, points per game is a bad metric for determining how sustainably good an offense actually is. And not just because sometimes special teams and defensive scores can inflate a team's points per game, but also because, after all, this is a sport where you have a hard cap for the number of points you can score in each possession. So it stands to reason that the fewer the overall possessions your team has in a game, the less points you're gonna score. Now, because of that reality, the true metric we should be using to tell us who has a good offense and who doesn't is scoring drive percentage, because that number is divorced from the amount of possessions that a team may or may not get in any given game. If you tend to score on a higher percentage of your given possessions, no matter what that number of possessions is, you're probably a good offense. In the first 3 weeks of the season, when everyone was panicking over the Chiefs' points per game totals, the teams with the highest scoring drive efficiency on real drives, meaning drives that weren't just running out the end of the half or kneeling out the end of the game, those top 5 teams were the Colts, Bills, Lions, Ravens, and Chargers, as you probably expected. But number 6, which maybe you didn't expect, was Kansas City. They were at a 50% flat overall scoring drive efficiency, even while only scoring 20 points per game over that span. That's really good. For reference, only 5 teams last year were at 50% or above for the entire 2024 season. But, that being said, one of the reasons why KC still only scored 20 points per game over that span is because their average possession count in those games was just 8.7 per game, tied for the 4th fewest in the NFL. Less possessions equals less possible points scored, after all. And one rabbit hole here that we also have to go down, by the way, while we're at it, is that their low possession count is also not an indicator of them being a bad offense. That low count is entirely by design, and I know it may not seem like they're a ball control type of team because they don't really run the ball that well, like most ball control teams do, but they still control possession extremely well with their quick passing game. They were 30th in possessions per game last year, they were 24th the year before that in 2023, they were 26th in 2022, and even in 2021, when they still had Tyreek Hill and had this reputation for bombing it down the field and scoring quickly, they were dead last in possessions per game that year as well. The Chiefs have been ball hogs and clock killers for a long time now, whose number one goal has always been to win on efficiency in high leverage situations like third down or in the red zone, rather than winning on volume. And that mentality is very deliberate because they've known basically every single year that they're probably going to go on a deep playoff run. So they strive to have as few plays as possible per game and also as few possessions per game as possible so that there is less wear and tear on their players as the season goes on. And therefore, ideally, they're going to be fresher come January and February. They don't really care if they put up monster points per game numbers anymore as long as they are efficient in the drives that they have. Because if each team only gets 10 possessions per game and they score on 50% of them while the opponent scores on 45%, guess what? They're probably going to win. And that win is good enough for them. Which, of course, brings us back to weeks 1 through 3 of this season. At that time, the Chiefs were 6th in scoring drive efficiency, they were 4th in plays per drive at 6.9, and they were still 11th in EPA per play as well. It was a good offense, even with all of their issues if you just dug one layer deeper than raw points per game. But that, of course, then elicits the question, if they were such a good offense, why weren't they a good offense? Like, how could they be that efficient but still not score any points? Well, it's because they weren't winning in those high leverage situations that normally they would dominate in. In weeks 1 through 3, they were only 22nd on third down conversion percentage after being 2nd in the league on third down last year, so they were stalling out on drives that normally they wouldn't stall out on in the past. And even on drives where they were making it to the red zone, they were 26th in red zone touchdown conversion percentage. And that's a key point here, because remember, not all scoring drives are created equal. There's field goal drives and touchdown drives, and they're not worth the same number of points. If you get down to the red zone a lot, but you're just getting 3s rather than 7s, then scoring drive efficiency can only get you so far. You have to actually finish the job and capitalize on your low possession count, which Kansas City was not doing back in September, nor was Mahomes doing his usual third down magic either that we've all become so accustomed to. Once those two parts of this offense got back on track, i.e. their third down offense and their red zone offense starting in week 4, everything else just kind of clicked into place around it. In weeks 4 through 7, they went from 22nd in third down percentage to 7th, which then directly resulted in them doubling their red zone trips per game, and at the same time, they paid off those extra red zone trips more as well, going from just a 44% red zone TD conversion rate early in the year up to just under 67% red zone touchdown conversions from weeks 4 to 8. For context, that's going from 26th to 8th in terms of red zone efficiency. Their overall rank in terms of scoring drive percentage didn't really go up by that much. They just went from 6th in the league to 2nd, only behind Indy, who's kind of lapping the field at this point. But because Kansas City is getting more 7s now rather than 3s, their points per game over the last 5 weeks has been 31.5 per game, up from 20 per week early on in the season. And get this, they're doing that while having fewer possessions per game than they had in those first 3 weeks. How's that for efficiency? And of course, it also probably helped that Kingsley Suamataia developed into a good starting guard, and they got back not just one, but 2 X factors in the receiving core in Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, but hey, who's counting? And speaking of factor, by the way, wow, this is such a shitty transition. I can't believe I'm even doing it, but whatever, we're already here. I want to thank Factor for sponsoring today's show and making it possible in the first place. That was awful. If you don't know who they are or what they do, Factor ships fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. All of the meals can be heated up in the microwave in just 2 minutes, they taste great, and there's a ton of variety so you never get bored. There are over 80 different meal options per week, including double the seafood options that they used to have, and more premium seafood options like salmon and shrimp at no additional cost. There's also 2 times as many high protein options now, including beef fillets, turkey, shredded beef, and meatballs. And you can even swap select proteins out now as well, if for instance you like chicken more than pork. Whatever your preferences are, they've got it. And the best part is, it cuts down on the amount of meal prepping and grocery shopping you have to do every single week. So if you're interested in getting meals that can be made fast, eaten conveniently, and taste good, all delivered right to your door, go to factor75.com, use promo code FILMROOMFB50. That's going to get you 50% off and free breakfast for a year with your subscription. Again, that is factor75.com, promo code FILMROOMFB50. It's going to get you 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Thank you to Factor once again for sponsoring today's show, and with that, let's get back to it. This is going to sound so reductive, but there is literally just one main reason why the Chiefs offense suddenly turned back into a juggernaut overnight, and it's that Patrick Mahomes stopped missing layups. That's kind of it. I'm not kidding. Yes, Xavier Worthy being back is big. The threat of his speed just creates so much natural space for him to operate in, and that is obviously important. And yes, Rashee Rice coming back and immediately being a good yards after catch threat again is also important, especially for an offense that relies so much on the quick game and yards after catch. Additionally, Travis Kelce looking more in shape early this year than he did last year is also huge. Kingsley Suamataia, like I mentioned earlier, only giving up 1 pressure per game on true dropbacks since week 4, despite kind of being a disaster in pass protection earlier in his career. That's also massive. Every one of these developments is amazing, don't get me wrong. But when it comes down to it, the night and day difference in this offense hasn't been any of those guys. It's been Patrick Mahomes not missing easy throws like he did early in the season. In the first 3 weeks, he was leading the NFL by a wide margin with 22 off-target incompletions in just 3 games. That was more than double the NFL average in that time period. Normally, it's all well and good to run a low-volume, high-efficiency style of offense that doesn't run the ball that much when you have a quarterback that doesn't miss. But when he is missing, and he is inaccurate, that force multiplier becomes a dangerous bottleneck really quickly. And as crazy as it is to say, Patrick Mahomes was a bottleneck to start the year. Again, specifically in those first 3 weeks, on throws under 10 yards from the line of scrimmage, Mahomes' completion percentage was only 73.5%, which sounds great on the surface until you realize that that would be 31st in the league among all quarterbacks with at least 25 attempts under 10 yards. While Jared Goff, as a counterexample, was the NFL leader over that time frame at 91.5% completion percentage under 10 yards. Josh Allen was at 86.9%. Even Russell Wilson was at almost 81%. So for Mahomes to be that inaccurate on the underneath throws that have long been the lifeblood of this passing game, especially on crucial third downs and in the red zone, that was just crippling to them in high leverage situations. They just couldn't get past it. And I'll just get out ahead of this rebuttal right now that I'm sure some of you might be typing in the comments. No, these misses were not just because he had backup receivers in the game. That is not an excuse for how bad some of these balls were, and even he said so himself. He was just flat out missing passes that should have been picking up key third downs and that should have been turning field goal drives into touchdown drives. It was rough. But then, somehow, a switch was flipped. Starting in week 4, and you can call it a get-right game against Baltimore if you want to, but ever since that week, Mahomes has been deadly accurate, and his off-target incompletion rate has dropped from that dreadful 7.3 per game mark all the way down to just 3 per game, which is better than the NFL average, mind you. And crucially, he only has 1 third down miss over that entire stretch, which is the lowest count in the league. His uptick in accuracy on third down has directly correlated to the Chiefs being the 7th best third down offense in the league since week 4. And as I mentioned, they also got up to 8th in the NFL in terms of converting their red zone trips into touchdowns. And truth be told, I'd like to sit here and say that Andy Reid found some magic new schematic formula to rescue this offense, or that they're doing something new to unlock Worthy and Rice, but they're not. This is still the exact same offense they've always run. The concepts are the same, and the philosophy is the same. Just like always, they don't use a lot of motion overall relative to everybody else, but when they do use motion, they're elite at it because they do so with purpose. They're not just spamming motion for the sake of motion, they use it to gain leverage advantages on quick releases for these underneath throws, or they do it at the last possible second to get into bunch looks right as the ball is snapped, so it screws with the defense and they can't get into their bunch check in time. Then you got guys running wide open like they always do. Everything has a purpose for why and when it is called. It's still the same stuff. If you give them a man look in the red zone, guess what? They're going to call a pick play and probably score on it. If you call zone coverage in the red zone, their receivers are masters of adjusting their stems and pacing in their routes to create windows for Mahomes to throw missiles into at the goal line. On top of all that, the Chiefs' offense, in my opinion, is still the best example of how to use a quarterback's mobility to make the passing game more reliable. For instance, why try to throw an outbreaking route from a really sharp angle and try to fit the ball in through multiple sets of hands, when instead we can just roll the quarterback in that direction by design so that it softens the angle of the throw to that landmark and makes it a safer completion. The route is still timed the same and the throw is still going to the same spot, it's just coming from a much softer angle. It's like a form of football geometry if you really think about it. All of these little details of space and pace and timing and leverage that Kansas City has come to master over the years, that's what sets them apart from everybody else. That's why they can get away with having fewer possessions as a pass-oriented team while nobody else can. They have the efficiency of an elite ground game without using the ground game. That is their identity. But when that identity was compromised by a spell of just flat-out inaccuracy by the man who was tasked with making it all work, well, that's how the engine quickly turned into a boat anchor. Luckily for Kansas City, Mahomes has never been one to be down for long. Alright, that'll do it for me today. Quick reminder before you leave, I have 2 podcasts that go live every single week over on the Bootleg Football Podcast channel. So if you either want to watch the podcast or you consume podcasts through audio, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, whatever your normal podcast place is. We're everywhere. So again, that is the Bootleg Football Podcast, and hope to see you over there pretty soon. Until next time, later.